What if the most beautiful mansion in America was built not from wealth, but from desperation? Behind Mar-a-Lago's golden gates lies a story of power bought on debt, beauty paid for by struggle, and secrets buried under the weight of a collapsing dream. Tonight, we uncover the truth they tried to forget, and the hidden cost of America's most controversial mansion. We'll explain everything in this video, step by step. Don't skip it. Mar-a-Lago stands as more than just a mansion. It is an emblem of America's unending tension between grandeur and fragility, a paradox born from the same soil that nurtured both ambition and anxiety. From its earliest conception in the 1920s, it embodied the intoxicating promise of American prosperity, the belief that success could be immortalized in stone, glass, and gold. Yet beneath its flawless facade lay the pulse of a country forever wrestling with its own contradictions, forever reaching upward, even as it feared collapse. The mansion's story begins in an era when the nation was roaring, a decade of lavish spending and restless dreams. Industry thrived, fortunes multiplied, and the wealthy, eager to etch their names into history, turned their eyes toward architectural immortality. Marjorie Merriweather Post, one of the richest women in America, envisioned a home that would unite the extremes of nature and symbolize harmony between power and beauty. But what she created became something larger than herself, a mirror of the country's aspiration, reflecting not only its brilliance, but also the deep fault lines beneath its polished surface. The 1920s were years of gilded illusion. The nation had emerged victorious from the First World War, flush with pride and new wealth. Wall Street was the altar, and speculation the prayer. Luxury was no longer the privilege of kings. It was the badge of success in a capitalist Eden. Marjorie's fortune, inherited from the empire, built by her father's Postum cereal company, gave her the means to chase perfection. She commissioned architects Marion Sims, Wyeth, and Joseph Urban to create something timeless, a mansion that would stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to Lake Worth, the sea-to-lake estate that inspired its name. It was designed to be an American Versailles, a fusion of Mediterranean revival and Spanish colonial grandeur. But behind the artistry and imported tiles, behind the carved ceilings and gold leaf details, lay a more profound truth. The house was not just an indulgence. It was an act of faith in the permanence of American wealth, a testament to a nation convinced its prosperity could never fade. As thousands of laborers laid bricks and tiles under the Florida sun, the country's economic machine surged forward, blind to the storm brewing on the horizon. The mansion's very construction echoed the inequality that pulsed beneath America's boom, the divide between those who built dreams and those who merely built them for others. The craftsmen, the servants, the gardeners, the suppliers, their wages were meager compared to the extravagance they helped create. Yet they worked tirelessly, not just for money, but for survival, for the fragile dignity of labor in a world where the wealthy seemed untouchable. Mar-a-Lago's rising walls were a monument to their invisible effort, to the anonymous hands that turned luxury into legacy. As the mansion neared completion in 1927, its opulence was unrivaled. Over 100 rooms, 1,000 rare tiles, and priceless works of art filled its halls. It was a stage for power, a place where guests of status and influence could mingle under the glow of chandeliers while the Atlantic winds whispered through the palms outside. But every chandelier casts a shadow, and in those shadows lay the truth that America preferred to ignore. The national economy, inflated by speculation and credit, was living on borrowed time. Beneath the marble floors and grand feasts, debt crept quietly through banks, farms, and households. The very system that allowed such mansions to rise was already trembling beneath its own ambition. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the illusion shattered. The glittering decade dissolved into fear, hunger, and ruin. Across the nation, people lost everything: homes, jobs, hope. In the wake of that collapse, Mar-a-Lago became an uneasy monument. While breadlines formed in city streets, the mansion remained standing, its beauty untarnished, its light still burning. It was both a sanctuary and a symbol of division, a reminder of how fragile prosperity could be, how easily opulence could turn into guilt. The very walls that had been built to celebrate abundance now seemed to mock the desperation outside their gates. America had entered a new age of reckoning, and Mar-a-Lago, in all its splendor, became an emblem of both endurance and denial. Yet even as the Great Depression deepened, Marjorie Merriweather Post held to her creation. She poured what remained of her fortune into maintaining it, refusing to let decay claim what she had built. The mansion's survival mirrored America's own struggle to preserve its identity amid economic ruin. It was not simply about wealth anymore. It was about the illusion of control, the belief that beauty could stand untouched while the world crumbled beyond its borders. In that contradiction, the coexistence of grandeur and grief, lay the essence of Mar-a-Lago's power. It was not merely a house of luxury. It was a house of denial, a living allegory for a nation torn between pride and panic. As years passed, and the nation fought its way through recovery, through war, and into a new kind of modernity, the mansion's significance evolved. It came to represent the endurance of the American dream, but also its distortion. Marjorie's creation had weathered economic storms and cultural revolutions, yet it never escaped the moral question that haunted it. Could a house so steeped in excess truly belong to the same nation that had known bread lines and battlefields? In the opulence of its halls lingered the echo of that question, unanswered, unforgotten. Mar-a-Lago's story, in truth, is the story of America itself, the simultaneous rise and unraveling of a society built on ambition. Every beam and arch speaks of ingenuity, every gilded surface of hope, but also of blindness. For every success, there was sacrifice. For every triumph, a cost. The mansion stands as a reminder that progress often walks hand in hand with inequality, that luxury is built not just from wealth, but from the quiet endurance of those who can never afford it. It reflects the paradox of a country that dreams in gold, even when its foundations tremble with debt. Through decades of turmoil, the mansion has continued to mirror the shifting identity of the nation, its optimism, its hubris, its relentless desire to be remembered. Even as ownership changed and political winds shifted, the essence of Mar-a-Lago remained constant, a beacon of aspiration, rising above an ocean of uncertainty. The same forces that once built it, ambition, wealth, and faith in the permanence of power, continue to shape the American psyche. Yet time has not softened its contradictions, it has only deepened them. To look upon Mar-a-Lago is to see America reflected in architecture, a nation that builds its dreams tall enough to defy its fears, yet cannot escape the shadows those dreams cast. Its splendor tells one story, its silence another. It is a monument to victory and vulnerability alike, a structure that celebrates prosperity while whispering warnings of its fragility. It endures not merely because of its beauty, but because it holds within its walls the truth of a nation forever divided between what it desires to be and what it dares to remember. The beauty of Mar-a-Lago is undeniable, a masterpiece of architecture born from imagination, wealth, and willpower. Its marble floors shimmer under the Florida sun, its ironwork curls like frozen music, and its tiled roofs glow with Mediterranean warmth. Yet every glint of gold hides a shadow, every ornament conceals a cost. The splendor that defines Mar-a-Lago did not come easily, nor did it emerge without consequence. Beneath its beauty lies a story of strain, financial, emotional, and moral, a struggle between vision and viability that mirrors the nation's own uneasy dance with prosperity. To call it beautiful is to acknowledge the labor that made it so, the fortune risked, the depths incurred, and the quiet desperation that fueled its creation. When Marjorie Merriweather Post first conceived of Mar-a-Lago, she saw more than a home, she saw an ideal. She wanted a mansion that would reflect the soul of an ascending America, a house that could outlast her lifetime and stand as a symbol of refinement in a nation still defining its identity. Her wealth, vast and commanding, came from industry, from factories, from marketing, from a modern economy that turned food into empire. Yet, even with all her riches, beauty of this scale required more than imagination. It required sacrifice. The construction alone demanded vast sums, drawn from accounts already stretched by the tides of inflation and shifting markets. Materials were imported from Europe, artisans were hired from across the globe, and each detail was measured not in time, but in cost. In the decade of its creation, the American economy was a glittering paradox. Outwardly, it gleamed with confidence. Skyscrapers rising, fortunes multiplying, industry expanding. Yet beneath the optimism, financial instability festered. Credit had become the nation's new oxygen, fueling everything from grand estates to common homes. Banks lent freely, speculation soared, and the promise of endless growth drowned out any whisper of warning. Marjorie's project, extravagant even by the standards of her peers, was an act of faith. In that promise, the faith that beauty could be purchased without peril, that America's ascent had no ceiling. But beauty, especially of this magnitude, demanded more than money. It demanded maintenance, labor, and time. And these, unlike gold, are never infinite. Each carved ceiling beam, each imported mosaic, each handcrafted door carried with it a story of unseen struggle. Behind the grandeur stood teams of craftsmen who worked through the sweltering Florida heat, hands blistered and lungs filled with dust. They were paid wages that, though fair by the standards of their day, could not compare to the wealth they were helping to manifest. For every inch of marble polished, there were hours of unseen toil. For every chandelier that glowed above the ballroom, there were dozens of men who had wired, hung, and cleaned it. The house's beauty was not simply designed. It was built by human endurance, by sweat turned into ornament. Marjorie herself bore another kind of weight. The mansion consumed not only her money but her peace. Every grand vision comes at the expense of something unseen, and for her, it was stability. The cost of beauty grew with each passing month, each imported shipment, each delay. Inflation crept across the economy, eroding the value of even the richest fortunes. The markets wavered, the political landscape trembled. The burden of financing perfection pressed down like the Florida humidity. Marjorie poured her heart into Mar-a-Lago not merely as a collector of art, but as a woman determined to create permanence in a world that was beginning to crack. The 1920s taught America that beauty could be both its greatest triumph and its greatest temptation. Mansions rose across the country like monuments to ambition, symbols of what wealth could achieve when imagination met excess. But as quickly as they ascended, they revealed the fragility beneath their foundation. The economy that had made them possible was built on speculation and illusion. When the Great Depression struck, beauty itself became a liability. The ornate houses that once glittered with light became burdens too heavy to sustain. Many were sold, abandoned, or lost to debt. Mar-a-Lago survived, but survival came at a cost: constant maintenance, endless repairs, and the quiet fear that grandeur might turn to ruin. Even in the decades that followed, the mansion's upkeep was a battle. Its scale was both its triumph and its curse. The property stretched across acres of land, exposed to the sea's sultan. Wind, a living entity that required care, labor, and endless money. As the nation struggled through war and recovery, Marjorie fought her own private war against decay. She poured more funds into preservation, even as taxes rose and fortunes fluctuated. For her, the mansion's beauty was not a luxury to be discarded. It was a legacy to be defended. But that defense came with sacrifices, the quiet draining of resources, the negotiation with lenders, the awareness that perfection, once built, must be paid for forever. Mar-a-Lago's beauty was also political. In its halls, power found comfort. Diplomats, industrialists, and generals passed through its rooms, drawn by its allure. The mansion became a stage for America's post-war identity, powerful, glamorous, and deeply indebted. Its magnificence projected national confidence, but behind the gilded surfaces lay the same financial anxieties that haunted the rest of the country. Inflation surged, markets shifted, and even the wealthiest Americans felt the tightening grasp of a new economic era. The struggle to sustain Mar-a-Lago mirrored the struggle of a nation balancing prosperity with debt, glamour with gravity. The mansion's beauty also carried a moral cost. Every act of preservation demanded labor, and that labor came from ordinary people. Caretakers, maids, electricians, gardeners, whose names would never be written into the mansion's history. They kept the walls clean, the chandeliers glowing, the lawns immaculate. They repaired what the storms destroyed and replaced what time corroded. They gave the mansion life each day, and in doing so, gave it meaning. Yet their presence was quiet, their effort invisible, their reward modest. The mansion's perfection was sustained by the imperfections of those who served it. The wealth that adorned its halls was built upon the work of hands that would never touch that same luxury. Over the years, as the ownership of Mar-a-Lago changed and its purpose evolved, the story of its beauty remained constant, not as a static achievement, but as a living testament to what beauty costs to maintain. It has been bought, sold, restored, and repurposed, but never freed from the financial gravity that binds great monuments to their creators. Every layer of paint, every repaired tile, every polished window pane adds another chapter to the same truth, that beauty is never free. It demands payment, in labor, in money, in time, in the quiet sacrifices that history too often forgets. The beauty of Mar-a-Lago was never accidental. It was deliberate, painstaking, and costly. It represented the height of human aspiration to make something lasting, something magnificent, something eternal. But it also exposed the fragility of that aspiration, the way perfection depends on imbalance, on systems of wealth and power that can falter as easily as they rise. Behind every polished surface lies an invisible network of depths, loans, and human effort. Behind every shimmering reflection lies a truth unspoken, that even beauty, when built on such foundations, carries with it a kind of burden that never truly fades. When the gates of Mar-a-Lago first opened, they revealed not only a mansion of breathtaking opulence, but a vision of America at its most divided. Inside its marble halls, music played, glasses clinked, and light spilled from chandeliers like liquid gold. Outside, across the restless country, men and women lined up for work, for bread, for dignity. This was the paradox that defined the age, a nation of abundance. Despair existing side by side, where one family's fortune could illuminate a palace, while entire towns went dark. The contrast between luxury within Mar-a-Lago's walls and the poverty that stretched across Depression era. America was not just a matter of economics. It was a reflection of the human soul at war with itself. The mansion stood like a dream carved into reality, an island of glamour surrounded by an ocean of struggle, a place where wealth seemed infinite while hope elsewhere was running dry. Marjorie Merriweather Post, its creator, lived in a world of privilege, but she was not blind to the tremors that shook the nation. She had inherited vast wealth, yet even she knew that fortunes were fragile, that the markets were fickle gods. Still, she built, because to build was to believe in the permanence of prosperity. Every ballroom, every courtyard, every fountain was a declaration of faith in the idea that America's golden age would never end. But when the crash came in 1929, when Wall Street crumbled and factories closed, the dream shattered like glass underfoot. Outside her gates, millions of Americans faced unemployment and hunger. The same hands that had laid the mansion's stones now stood idle. The same families that had carried bricks and tiles now counted coins to buy bread. The divide between those who had and those who had not became a wound too wide to heal. Inside Mar-a-Lago, the lights still burned. Servants tended the fires, dinners were served, and the illusion of stability was carefully maintained. Yet even within those walls, the tension was palpable. The very air seemed heavy with the awareness that something irreversible had happened. The mansion became a relic of a vanished era, not a celebration of triumph, but a monument to loss. Every ornament gleamed a little too brightly. Every note of laughter echoed with unease. Beauty, once a source of pride, began to feel like guilt. Marjorie's guests could not escape the knowledge that beyond the gardens and the sea walls their country was suffering. The opulence that once symbolized American success now served as a mirror reflecting its despair. In towns and cities far from the sunlit coast of Palm Beach, ordinary people faced realities unimaginable to those who danced in gilded halls. Factories shuttered, farms failed, and banks folded overnight. Families were uprooted, their lives reduced to what could fit into a single suitcase. Lines of hungry men stretched down city blocks. Children went barefoot through winter. In those same years, Mar-a-Lago remained immaculate, tended by gardeners, trimming hedges, maids polishing floors, cooks preparing feasts. The mansion was a world apart, existing on the same map as the rest of America but under a different sky. Its survival became symbolic, proof that wealth could shield some from ruin, even as the foundations of society cracked beneath them. But luxury is never entirely untouched by the world beyond its gates. The Depression did not spare even the wealthy from anxiety. The value of money itself changed. Inflation eroded fortunes. Taxes increased. Investments vanished. To maintain Mar-a-Lago required more than income. It required devotion. The cost of its beauty became heavier, its maintenance more desperate. Marjorie's wealth insulated her, but it did not free her. She watched as friends lost estates, as family fortunes dissolved into dust. The mansion, meant to be a testament to success, became instead a burden, a symbol of endurance in an age of loss. It was as if the house itself resisted surrender, refusing to acknowledge the collapse of the world that had built it. While the Great Depression deepened, another battle unfolded quietly within those walls, the mortal reckoning of privilege. What did it mean to possess such abundance when so many had none? What did it mean to host grand dinners while others starved? Marjorie, like many of her class, turned to philanthropy, giving to charities, supporting relief efforts, funding hospitals. But even generosity could not erase the contradiction. The mansion itself remained a monument to inequality, a place where elegance was preserved at any cost while the country outside struggled simply to survive. The sight of such luxury during such hardship became, for many Americans, both fascinating and infuriating. Newspapers published photographs of Palm Beach soirees beside images of breadline, contrasting pearls with hunger, silk gowns with tattered coats. The nation could not look away from its own divided reflection. As the years passed and war reshaped the world, once again the contrast between the privileged few and the suffering many only grew sharper. During World War II, the American home front became a theater of sacrifice, rationing, shortages, tire drives, blackouts. The working class bore the brunt of the war effort, while the wealthy adapted in subtler ways. Mar-a-Lago, ever radiant, hosted officers, politicians, and foreign dignitaries, its halls echoing with talk of strategy and peace. Yet behind every elegant gathering lay the unseen sacrifices of ordinary people. Soldiers fought abroad, families rationed food, and factories turned from luxury goods to weapons. The burden of war was distributed unequally, as it had always been. The mansion's light stayed on, while other homes dimmed their bulbs to save power. The contrast that defined Mar-a-Lago's story was not unique to its walls. It was the essence of America's own narrative, a nation that built monuments to success while millions labored in silence, a people who celebrated wealth as destiny, even when debt and hunger followed them home. The beauty of Mar-a-Lago, the comfort it offered, existed because of, not despite, that imbalance. Every feast, every gala, every new coat of paint depended on the toil of others, on economies that exploited the many to elevate the few. The servants who walked its corridors during those years came from families who had known poverty, who measured wealth in stability rather than excess. They ironed silks they could never wear, prepared banquets they would never taste, and dusted furniture they would never own. Their presence ensured the illusion of effortlessness that defined the mansion's splendor. Through each passing decade, as America evolved, so too did the meaning of Mar-a-Lago's grandeur. To some, it remained a masterpiece of architecture, a symbol of resilience. To others, it became a reminder of inequality, a place where privilege persisted while the world struggled below it. The economic booms and busts of the 20th century, the wars, the recessions, the recoveries, all passed through the nation's history like tides, yet the mansion remained anchored, glowing against the night as though immune to the storms. That illusion of immunity, that serene defiance of hardship, made Mar-a-Lago both admired and resented. Every generation of Americans has looked upon its gates and seen something different: ambition, arrogance, achievement, excess. Yet through them all, one truth has remained constant to beauty. Within those walls was sustained by contrasts too stark to ignore. It represented the triumph of wealth over want, of privilege over poverty, of illusion over truth. The country that built Mar-a-Lago was the same country that sent men to mines, women to factories, children to labor, all in the service of a system that promised prosperity but delivered it unequally. Inside the mansion, music played softly against the crash of the waves, the sound of celebration echoing faintly above the rhythm of struggle that beat just beyond its gates. Power, debt, and dependency are the unspoken architecture of Mar-a-Lago, the invisible framework beneath its gold leaf and marble. From its conception, the mansion was not only a monument to ambition, but a negotiation with debt, financial, political, and moral. Its story, like that of the nation that built it, is one of opulence, sustained by obligation, of wealth purchased with uncertainty. Each phase of its existence has been shaped by the quiet forces that move beneath the surface of luxury. The loans that built it, the markets that threatened it, the alliances that preserved it. What appears eternal in its splendor is, in truth, a structure held together by fragile promises and borrowed time. When Marjorie Merriweather Post commissioned Mar-a-Lago in the 1920s, she did so in an age intoxicated by prosperity. Money flowed freely, credit was cheap, and the American elite lived as though the new century would never know hardship again. Yet even then, the cost of grandeur was immense. The construction of the estate required more than cash, it required confidence. In the permanence of wealth, in the illusion that fortune could not fade, the loans taken to secure materials, the wages owed to workers, the contracts signed with architects and artisans, all were threads in a web of financial dependence. Marjorie's vision was vast, but its realization rested upon a system already stretched to its breaking point. The economy itself was a house built on speculation, and Mar-a-Lago was one of its most dazzling rooms. When the crash came in 1929, the entire nation felt the shudder. Fortunes evaporated, credit froze, and once wealthy families found themselves bound by debts they could no longer repay. Even the great estates trembled. To maintain such a property during those years was an act of endurance, a declaration of defiance against the collapse of an age. Marjorie's wealth, though vast, was not immune to the crisis. The value of her holdings fell, investments vanished, and the burden of taxes grew heavier. Yet she refused to surrender her creation. She borrowed when necessary, sold other properties, and cut costs where she could. The mansion became both a refuge and a responsibility, a constant reminder of how easily prosperity could turn to liability. Debt, in those years, became more than a financial condition. It became the language of survival. The nation itself sank into it, borrowing to rebuild, to feed, to fight. The government issued bonds, businesses took loans, and ordinary people lived on credit that they could scarcely repay. America learned that progress was often purchased with promises, and Mar-a-Lago reflected that truth with unflinching clarity. The mansion's beauty, its endurance, its preservation, all were made possible by cycles of borrowing and repayment that stretched across generations. Even as it stood gleaming beneath the Florida sun, its stability depended on the instability of the world around it. By the 1940s, as war reshaped the global order, America's economic engine roared back to life, but not without cost. Factories turned to weapons production, industries merged with government contracts, and the lines between private wealth and public power blurred. The wealthy invested in war bonds, lent to the state, and profited from Reconstruction. The debts that once crippled the nation became the foundation of its resurgence. Mar-a-Lago, during these years, became a gathering place for the powerful, a sanctuary where generals, politicians, and diplomats could meet amid luxury even as the world burned beyond its walls. Its existence during wartime symbolized a kind of continuity, proof that power could endure chaos. Yet that endurance came at a price, measured not in money, but in moral weight. For every banquet held in its halls, soldiers fought across oceans, financed by the same economy that kept the lights on in Palm Beach. In the decades that followed, debt became the engine of American growth. Loans built highways, funded suburbs, and filled homes with appliances and cars. The nation's prosperity rested increasingly on what it owed rather than what it owned. The same pattern echoed in the life of Mar-a-Lago. The mansion's maintenance was costly beyond imagination, and even the wealthy found its upkeep daunting. The taxes, the staff, the repairs all demanded constant spending. Marjorie attempted to donate the estate to the government after her death, envisioning it as a presidential retreat, but even the federal government found it too expensive to maintain. The gesture revealed a quiet truth. The very institutions of power that had once seemed infinite were themselves constrained by the same limits that haunted every empire of wealth. The dependency woven into Mar-a-Lago's story was not only financial but symbolic. It depended on the perception of value, on the belief that grandeur could still command reverence in an age increasingly defined by practicality. When the nation's priorities shifted, when luxury began to look like excess rather than virtue, Mar-a-Lago's future wavered. Yet its survival, like that of America's elite, depended on adaptation, on finding new ways to turn prestige into profit, to translate beauty into influence. Ownership became a form of power, and power became a kind of currency. The mansion was not merely inherited, it was leveraged, transformed, and repurposed. In that transformation lay the echo of the nation's own evolution. A country once proud of its self-reliance, now bound to systems of credit, trade, and foreign debt. Foreign influence, too, played its part in the mansion's long survival. The wealth that maintained its walls came increasingly from global markets, investment abroad, partnerships overseas, fortunes tied to economies far beyond America's shores. As the century turned and globalization deepened, the lines between domestic wealth and foreign capital blurred entirely. Mar-a-Lago became not just an American estate, but a symbol within an interconnected world. Its gilded rooms illuminated by the same financial currents that moved through London, Moscow, and Riyadh. The loans and trades that flowed invisibly through banks and markets carried within them the same dependencies that had once sustained the mansion's construction. Power, once national, had become global. Debt, once private, had become planetary. The dependency at the heart of Mar-a-Lago was never just about money. It was about image, reputation, the illusion of control. The mansion had to project stability even when its foundations were uncertain. Its owners, through the decades, cultivated its myth carefully, presenting it as timeless. Even when every year brought new repairs, new expenses, new negotiations, the maintenance of grandeur required a performance. The same performance that nations give when they speak of strength while borrowing from their rivals, when they speak of independence while relying on unseen creditors. Mar-a-Lago, like America itself, existed in the tension between display and debt, between confidence and dependence. Every brick of the mansion, every acre of manicured land, tells a story of transaction. Behind every act of preservation lies a contract, a payment, a debt repaid or deferred. The mansion's existence has always depended on others, the laborers who built it, the bankers who financed it, the workers who maintain it. Its beauty is inseparable from its burdens. Power, in this place, is not freedom but obligation. To own such a house is to inherit its hunger, its endless need for upkeep, for attention, for money. The illusion of power within its walls conceals a truth that stretches far beyond Palm Beach, that the greater the wealth, the deeper the dependency it creates. Mar-a-Lago endures because it is built on the same foundation as the nation it reflects, a foundation of borrowed strength, of ambition sustained by credit, of glory balanced precariously atop unseen debts. It is the embodiment of a paradox that defines the American century, a reminder that prosperity and dependence are not opposite, but reflections of each other, bound together as tightly as the ocean and the shore that frame the mansion's name. Mar-a-Lago stands not only as a mansion of rare beauty, but as a mirror held up to the American soul. Its walls have seen the rise and fall of fortunes, the slow erosion of ideals, and the persistent yearning for greatness that defines a nation built on contradiction. To walk through its corridors is to walk through a reflection of America itself, a country that reaches ever higher for the promise of glory, while carrying the invisible weight of the sacrifices that made that ascent possible. Every arch, every gilded ceiling, every echoing room whispers of ambition, but beneath that ambition lies exhaustion, the quiet toll of those who paid for its splendor in ways history seldom records. From its earliest conception, Mar-a-Lago was envisioned not simply as a house, but as a statement, a declaration that America could create beauty to rival the old world, that luxury and permanence could belong to a new nation still defining its identity. Marjorie Merriweather Post sought to craft more than a home. She sought to craft a legacy. Her dream was steeped in optimism, but that optimism was distinctly American, born of both hope, hubris, of the belief that greatness could be built faster, grander, and higher than ever before. Yet in pursuing that dream, she unwittingly created a monument to the contradictions of the American experiment, a place where the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of power were indistinguishable, where aspiration and excess merged into one glittering symbol. The mansion's story unfolded in parallel with the nation's own, its triumphs and crises, its booms and busts, its dreams and debts. When America prospered, Mar-a-Lago gleamed. When America suffered, its beauty felt heavier, almost accusatory. During the Great Depression, as breadlines grew and banks collapsed, the mansion remained a world apart, illuminated against the darkness of the times. Yet its endurance was not merely a display of wealth. It was a reflection of a deeper instinct, the same instinct that has driven the country through every hardship, the refusal to yield. The lights stayed on because they had to. The mansion had to stand, just as the nation had to survive, even when the cost of survival was measured in silent suffering. The mirror Mar-a-Lago holds up is not a flattering one. It reveals the duality of the American dream, the brilliance of human creativity paired with the blindness of its ambition. Within its gates, power and privilege flourish, but outside them, the labor that sustains it remains unseen. The same can be said of the nation it represents. Progress built upon struggle, prosperity built upon inequity, freedom built upon sacrifice, the workers who raised its walls, the servants who polished its silver, the caretaker who preserved its gardens, they are the quiet architects of its glory. Their fingerprints are everywhere, though history rarely calls their names. They represent the millions who have built the foundations of American success, only to stand outside its gates, watching its light shimmer from afar. As decades passed, Mar-a-Lago evolved, and with it, the country changed. Wars came and went, economies rose and fell, Ideals were tested and reshaped. The mansion adapted as America always does, reinventing itself to survive. It became a playground for the powerful, a gathering place for influence, a symbol of status. Its beauty persisted, but so, too, did its burden. The mirror it held up grew sharper, reflecting not only the nation's wealth, but also its division. The same walls that once echoed with laughter began to echo with tension, with the sound of a country uncertain of what it had become. Mar-a-Lago's transformation over time mirrors America's own struggle with identity. Once a symbol of creation and aspiration, it became entangled in the politics of possession and power. Ownership, once an expression of success, became a stage for performance. The mansion's image was leveraged, its meaning reshaped to fit the desires of those who claimed it. Yet, no matter how its story has been rewritten, its essence remains the same. It is a vessel for the American psyche, reflecting both pride and guilt, greatness and fragility. Within its beauty lies the persistent tension between who the nation wants to be and who it truly is. Every generation that looks upon Mar-a-Lago sees itself in its reflection. To some, it represents triumph, the culmination of ambition and vision, proof that dreams can become reality. To others, it stands as a cautionary tale, a monument to greed and inequality, to the seductive power of appearances. But beyond admiration or resentment, there exists something more profound, recognition. The recognition that the mansion's story is the nation's story, a cycle of creation, consumption, and reinvention. It embodies the promise that anyone can rise, but also the truth that not everyone does. The mirror it holds does not discriminate between beauty and flaw. It reflects the best and worst of the American character, resilience, ingenuity, arrogance, excess, generosity, and desire. The nation that once sought to define itself by virtue of work now defines itself by the visibility of its success. The gilded ceilings of Mar-a-Lago are a testament to that evolution. The idea that greatness must be seen to be believed, that worth is measured in what can be displayed. Yet the same mirror reveals the emptiness that can accompany such display, the loneliness that hides behind the grandeur. The more lavish the setting, the more profound the silence becomes. Throughout its long history, Mar-a-Lago has weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. Hurricanes have battered its walls, and political tempests have surrounded its name. Still, it stands proud, gleaming, unyielding. But its endurance is not merely a testament to craftsmanship or wealth, it is the reflection of a national will to persist. America, too, has endured its tempests, clinging to the ideals that built it even as those ideals are tested. The mansion's survival is proof of what can be preserved through sheer determination, but also a reminder of what is lost along the way, the humanity often sacrificed in the name of permanence. In its gardens, one can almost hear the whispers of history, the laughter of the privileged mingling with the voices of those who labored unseen. The scent of salt air carries both pride and melancholy. There is a quiet knowledge within its stones that beauty is never without consequence, that power always leaves a shadow. The mansion endures not because it is immune to time, but because it absorbs it, because it reflects the endless rhythm of creation and decay that defines the nation itself. Each generation sees something different in its reflection, but all see themselves. The mirror of Mar-a-Lago does not judge, it reveals. It shows the boundless hope that built America, and the restless hunger that drives it still. It captures the contradiction of a people who strive for greatness, even as they wrestle with the cost of that striving. It reminds those who look upon it that beauty, power, and freedom are never separate from the sacrifices that sustain them. Its reflection stretches beyond Palm Beach, beyond wealth and politics, into the heart of what it means to be a nation, to dream endlessly, to build ambitiously, to forget easily, and to remember, too late, the hands that held the dream aloft.